It says it's recording, so
Yeah.
hopefully it does. Otherwise, we're about to spend an hour and a half or an hour at least.
The noise that says it's being recorded came on, so I think you're probably good.
Okay.
The mysterious Uber conference voice.
Right.
I mean, there's usually like a hold song that plays when you're the only one in the conference, which is honestly kind of fun to listen to. I want to see if I can find an MP3 of it later. It's like that. It sounds so. It's as good for like a throwaway as that that AT&T commercial that kept coming on with the one with the boy band this weekend.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I know the one. Yeah.
That song is a banger. I'm not gonna lie. I really like it. It's stuck in my head.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's some of these throwaway commercial songs. They get the job done.
So my favorite ones were the old freecreditreport.com ones.
Ooh.
Oh man,
JG
that's from
Wentworth?
back in the day.
Oh,
Yep.
I love JG Wentworth.
Welcome back to Signs of the Southland, everyone. My name is Akshay, and joining me from Atlanta, Georgia, and Atlanta, Georgia adjacent are Ethan Kreger, and new to the podcast, Benjamin Tankersley. How are y'all doing today?
Doing well. Weather down here in Atlanta has been really nice all weekend. Nice Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, I can't really complain either. Akshay said Atlanta adjacent. We're gonna call that hell, really, here in Athens. For those who don't know where I'm from, but yeah, it can't really complain too much. Most UGA students and fans are either up in Nashville or on their way back, so it's been nice and quiet this weekend.
Yeah, much different from your usual weekend up in hell.
Oh yeah, when it's a game day in Athens, I tend to just stay home.
I'd leave at that point. Just be like, I'm gonna go the other way where there is no traffic.
Well, I live far enough outside of Athens. It's not horrible, but I still feel it.
Womp womp. All right. Some miscellaneous housekeeping stuff. You can follow the From the Rumble Seat blog at FTRS blog on Twitter. And you can find this podcast on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever podcast app you patron. I think we're on all of them at this point. No stragglers left. But without further ado, let's get started. Ethan, I know you didn't go to these games, but what happened at O'Keefe Gym this weekend?
Yeah, the Jackets had their first preseason tune-up tournament. They played Long Beach State, Southern, and UNC Asheville. Dropped one set to Long Beach State, but won all 9 others. So, pretty good weekend overall. One of the new freshmen won the tournament MVP, Julia Bergman. Additionally, setter Maddie McKissick and middle blocker Cody Comey made the all-tournament team. So, good start for Tech, of course, but they started 8-0 last year in similar quality games, similar quality opponents. So, we need to wait a few more weeks to see some SEC teams, even a few conference games before we really make a decision on how good this team is going to be this year.
Yeah, and I think one interesting thing to note, too, is Mariana Brambilla was held out, if I remember correctly. I don't think we ever got an update if she was injured or it was just a random holdout for whatever. But the box stores, from what I saw, showed a lot of rotation. Like we got a lot of people that saw at least a set or two of action. So I think we're gonna have, even if she is injured, I think we're gonna have a decent amount of depth to back her up.
Yeah, that rotation will probably shorten up just as Josh Pastner and Michelle Joseph did every year with the basketball programs. We'll probably see that shorten up as the conference play season begins and we get deeper into the schedule.
Yeah, that's true. Next up for them, we have at Kennesaw State, 7 p.m. on the 3rd. So I guess that's Tuesday. I don't think there was a stream listed on RamlinRec.com, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was on ACC Network Extra. And then next weekend, Tech is hosting the Hyatt Regency Invitational versus Lipscomb and UEPUI. I'm totally saying that wrong, but it's fine. And both both of those games are 7 p.m. tips on the 5th and the 6th, respectively. So, yeah, lots of stuff going on.
Yep, should be a good weekend for volleyball.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of the same thing with these two teams, too. They're not super, I mean, they're not like your usual ACC, Big Ten fair, like your power teams in volleyball, but it's still good fodder for early in the season. Should help everyone get warmed up to speed right before conference play, like you're saying. So,
yep.
All right, I think we've buried the lead for long enough. On Thursday, Georgia Tech traveled to Death Valley, the second fake Death Valley in America, in Clemson, South Carolina. Clemson won 52-14. Tech seemed to have it and seemed to give Clemson a little bit of a scare early on, but it did not really end that way. Clemson picked up a muffed punt after their first possession, which had like a huge momentum swing, and then sort of just took it and ran from it from there. Offensively, the play calling wasn't particularly inspiring. I think we saw a lot of unique things, and y'all can speak more to that than I can, but I think the moving pocket was a pretty good idea, especially when you don't have that many athletic as big linemen. I mean, and then defensively, I think we saw a lot of positives. So even though he gave up 600 yards, there's a foundation to build off of. So yeah. Ethan, you want to go ahead and tell us how you felt, what you felt, prospects for the rest of the season?
So I was actually in Death Valley on Thursday night. I was in the Georgia Tech section right behind the band. And I can confirm that the energy that was starting to pick up in the Georgia Tech section, as we forced a 3-and-out against the defending national champions to open the game, and we're going to get the ball back, that energy all vanished as soon as Wanye Thomas muffed a punt and Clemson took it in for the first touchdown, even though, Tech put together a nice little drive after that, picked up a couple of first downs, and then ETN ripped off a 90-yard touchdown run and basically put the game away more or less at that moment. The muff punt was definitely the biggest moment early in the game, though, and the 4 turnovers as a whole, you just can't go into Death Valley and turn the ball over 4 times, commit false start penalties, and expect to win or even be competitive with the way that Clemson's played the last few years. So I thought the score pretty fairly reflected the level of talent disparity that was out on the field in that game. But then a little bit more specifically on offense, I certainly did not love the play calling either. I understand why they were calling some of the plays they were, but I wanted more screen passes called to try and negate the advantage that Clemson has up front and get their defensive line out having to move. And then I wanted more reads for both Tobias Oliver and for James Graham later in the game, where they could kind of scan the whole field but have some quicker looks, some slant routes, some flat routes, some things where you could get the ball out quickly instead of moving the pocket and giving them only half a field to look at with tiny little windows to fit the ball into, which is certainly not their strengths as former triple option quarterbacks. Give them the whole field, spread the defense out, but give them quicker throws to try and negate the Clemson pass rush was kind of what I was expecting, but it wasn't necessarily what I saw.
I would definitely agree. I had my own issues with the offensive play calling, specifically there was a point in the game where Clemson was every single play lining 9-10 guys in the box, daring Tobias Oliver to throw it, and every single time it was a run play. It's just something that, as a fan, I'm watching and I'm thinking, what is going on? I think part of that is just Tobias Oliver is probably the worst passing quarterback on our roster. And that's nothing against him personally. I think he's a great quarterback. Or not a great quarterback. I think he's a great athlete. And when he has the ball in his hands, has the ability to do something special. We saw it a lot last year when he would come in for Taquan Marshall. But simply put, he's not a quarterback. We got to see the offense open up a little bit with James Graham, and even though he struggled a little bit with some of the short to intermediate stuff, we saw some really nice passes from him. I know there were 2 kind of intermediate to deep passes to both Josh Blancato and Marion Brown, with that one going for a touchdown. I felt like it was kind of a glimpse of what this offense can actually look like. On the defensive side of things, I came away very impressed, despite the 50 points, 600 yards. There's a lot to like there. Specifically, I think in the secondary, Trey Swilling had just an incredible game. He was a guy I kept seeing being the play almost every single time. Came away with an interception, a few pass breakups, and that's against guys like Justin Ross, who's one of the best receivers in the ACC and probably the country.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I thought that, up front, we don't have great depth on the defensive line or at linebacker for that matter, too. And I think that's probably part of the reason that you saw Travis Etienne rip off a ridiculous line of 12 carries for 205 yards and 3 touchdowns. This is before the game, I made a remark to a Clemson fan that we were tailgating with that wouldn't shock me if Etienne went for 220 and 3 touchdowns. And unfortunately, my prediction wasn't too far off of what his actual line was. And I think on defense specifically, I would have liked to have seen somewhat of what Clemson was doing to us, especially with how Trevor Lawrence was struggling for portions of that game, which is not at all a common occurrence. I would have liked to see more 8-man fronts, make him throw the ball, one-on-one coverage, because if there's a strength of our defense, it's our corners out there on an island, has been mentioned. Trey Swilling had a great game. I would have liked to see a little bit more faith in him from our play calls on defense, load up the box a little bit more to try and help the line and the linebackers stop Etienne.
It's something that was actually kind of interesting. At one point during the game, I watched it from home. They flashed up a graphic on the screen showing Lawrence when he's got 4 guys rushing versus when it was a blitz. He actually was doing much better against the blitz. So I think that probably went into a little bit of that play calling decision. But my other big problem with the defense, it seems like every time a big play happened, whether it be the 90-yard Etienne touchdown or something else, it was because Georgia Tech's defense overcommitted, and they just ended up getting beat because they were focusing on this one thing, and then Clemson was like, we fooled you and did this. The main one I'm thinking about is the Etienne touchdown. You see Trevor Lawrence get the snap and roll out to the right and then just pass it off to Travis Etienne, who runs to the left where there's maybe like 2 defenders. I remember one was Christian Campbell, who got completely destroyed by a Clemson offensive lineman, and he was able to break off a 90-yard touchdown run easily. That's something that they're definitely going to need to work on moving forward.
Yeah,
I will say I prefer it to the Ted Roof model of defense, where we line up the corners 10 yards off the receiver and wait for the play to come.
Certainly is better than that. Yeah, as for the Etienne touchdown run, that's a fairly basic little draw play that they ran very effectively with Deshaun Watson and Wayne Gallman back in the day, too. And I'm very surprised that they didn't see that one show up on film when they were preparing for the game and at least alert the linebackers and the rest of the defense that, Clemson likes to run this draw play when they roll or fake roll Lawrence out to the right. So I don't know. I've just certainly seen Clemson run that play before, and the defense did not look at all prepared for it.
No, they did not. So my other big problem throughout the game was I felt like there were a handful of special teams miscues. Presley Harvin had a great game, averaged like 43 or something yards a punt. But other than the fact that he had to punt 8 times, yeah, he had a good game. But in terms of the return game, special teams blocking was not good. It's about kickoff coverage. The few times that we got to see it, struggled, and Clemson got, I'd say, good but not great returns, which is a little discouraging because all this offseason we've heard that Jeff Collins is going to start working more like starter scholarship players into those special teams alignments to really put an emphasis on it.
Yeah, and that's where the talent disparity in the guys that we recruit and the guys that Clemson recruits can really show up, is when you come in there on special teams. and you've got Clemson backups who were 4 or 5-star recruits running down the field against, even if it's Georgia Tech starters, it's 3-star recruit guys that just aren't quite as athletic as the guys that they're having to attempt to block. And I know on the punt return, or no, it was a kickoff return when they finally put Amarine Brown back there to return. And he certainly looked a little bit tentative in the 2 returns that he had. But I think part of the problem was that there were 3 or 4 Clemson kick cover team members who ran down the field and more or less didn't get touched and basically gave him no time to try to make a move or do anything before he was swarmed.
Oh, is that the one where he caught it like a couple yards deep in the end zone, looked like he was going to take a knee, and then ran out and got like 10 yards?
That was Wanye, I believe, and that was just an unacceptable mistake. The one I'm thinking of was later in the game when Amarine Brown was back there and he took the kick, and the couple returns that he had, the problem that he seemed to have was that, the best kick returners just get downhill as quickly as they can. Whatever small hole opens up, you just have to run through it instead of standing around and waiting for defenders to come to you. And that was kind of what he was doing once he got out to about the 15-yard line. And Clemson's team speed, good old hashtag SEC team speed, but Clemson's team speed was just too much for our team the whole game, but especially on special teams.
Yeah, and Wanye just did not have a good game. Like, he just didn't start off right. Starting with that muffed punt, and then some of these returns were just, like both of y'all are saying, they were just questionable return decisions across the board. Like, especially when you're receiving a kickoff in the end zone and you have you have 11 Clemson defenders barreling down the field towards you. You take a knee. You put your knee on. You put your knee on the ground. You take it at the 25. It's like some of those decisions. I think they'll get cleaned up this week, but it's not particularly heartening to see something that we weren't great at special teams returns and special teams defense last year, but like what we're talking about, Wanye Thomas, who had 5 kick return, at least 3 kick return touchdowns last season. It's not super.
I think it was 2.
It was 2. Yeah, it was 2.
Okay, maybe I'm talking.
It was the one against Georgia and one other
Virginia.
one. Virginia. Yeah.
It was off of a safety punt.
Oh, okay. That's right.
All right. Well, I'm gonna believe it's 5 because that makes me sound better, and I can afford to be a little bit more.
He also had a pick
six
performance.
Yeah,
well, I will definitely jump on that hype train.
Yeah, I think it doesn't derail his hype train that we've been riding for a couple years now, but it's certainly, someone forgot to put coal in for a couple days kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any final thoughts on the Clemson game?
Are we going to talk about quarterbacks at all?
Oh, do you want to? Is that a discussion we need to be having?
I mean, I feel like, you're listening to a recap of Clemson, Georgia Tech. You have to talk about quarterback play.
Yeah.
At least a little bit.
That's true.
But my main problem, and I think both of you would agree, we didn't really get to see what Lucas Johnson could do. He got 1 drive right at the end of the first half, played maybe 3 plays, and didn't do much, but didn't get an opportunity outside of that.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that we only saw him for 1 drive in a very situational role at the end of the first half when he came in, and clearly the idea was to throw passes, which is definitely his strength in comparison to Tobias Oliver and James Graham.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of the reason we probably didn't see him as much as we saw the other 2 guys was just that, Pat Knott and the rest of the offensive staff knew that whoever was back there was going to be under pressure and was going to have to use their legs to be able to get out of the pocket and create either, an opportunity for a receiver off of a scramble or a run for themselves. And I have a feeling that coming off of an Achilles injury, he's certainly the least mobile of the 3 quarterbacks and possibly by far. And that in this game specifically, he may not have been the best fit for what we needed to be trying to do. Don't know over the next couple of weeks if we'll see any more of him, but
even saying that, he can still run. Like there was one play I remember, Johnson had rolled out to the right and looks like he was about to take off running because he had clear lane in front of him. Could have gotten either close to the first down or gotten the first down, but decided to throw it instead for an incomplete pass. To me, obviously it's a small sample size, but he looked really timid in that game. Like he was afraid of the Clemson defense, which personally I don't blame him, because Georgia Tech's offensive line isn't exactly great. It's very much a work in progress. There's not a lot of depth, and you're going against probably the best defense in the country. So I kind of get that timidness, but it's weird to see that and then watch James Graham come in a little bit later, and he is just like the most confident person you've ever seen out there. Like, just seeing the ball fly out of his hands, he takes the snap, and he's just a guy like, yeah, he's a quarterback. He is here. He is ready to play. And, personally, that's what I want from a quarterback. That just confidence.
Yeah, there was a certain swagger that he had.
That's the word I
was
thinking.
Yeah. And I mean, you saw it on that. I think it was a touchdown pass to Amarian Brown sometime in the second half, where he just ball comes out of his arm like a cannon.
Yeah.
And Brown does a little bit of the work too, just to get open and get into the end zone. But there was just he wanted, like, of course it comes with the caveat that he's working against your Clemson backups and rotational players. But
I mean, you say that, but that's still 4 or 5-star players.
Yeah, that's still yeah. I was about to say that's like still a starting roster in most places in the ACC and probably most of the SEC too. Like, it's not like he was playing against scrubs, and he was still able to sort of sling the ball, again, garbage time, but he did it with a certain sense of swagger that it was refreshing, to say the least.
I think he's the quarterback that you could see start on Saturday that I would be the least upset about. But if they start Tobias Oliver again on Saturday, I will definitely start to lose a little bit of confidence in this coaching staff, which I know it's early, but if you can't see that he's not a good passing quarterback and you're trying to transition to more of a passing team, and you do have those options on your roster above the line that are better passers, I feel like that says a lot about you as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally get that point of view. And after all they've been saying this offseason, it's a little surprising that they don't want to come out here and throw more. But you do also have to take a look at the makeup of this roster on offense, specifically the offensive line, and understand that for the time being, even though they want to throw, they want to be able to, give the quarterback some time back in the pocket to go through a progression and look down the field. For the moment, we have an offensive line and an offense as a whole built to run the ball. We don't have a lot of playmakers on the outside that are proven. We have some that are very young who look very talented and could be very good receivers down the road. But the playmakers and the experience that this team has at quarterback is running the ball, and then elsewhere is on the offensive line run blocking for the few offensive linemen who return. And then at running back, of course, with Jerry Howard and Jordan Mason, you've got lots of experience there too. So I think part of the reason we saw Oliver and part of the reason why we may see him again on Saturday is just that, his strengths play more into the strengths of the offense as a whole. I would certainly not hate to see James Graham or Lucas Johnson out there, but I also wouldn't mind seeing Tobias again and giving him a shot against a team that's probably more Georgia Tech's level.
Yeah,
I guess my thing is...
go ahead, Ben.
I guess my thing is, you come in, you say all these things about wanting to be a more pass-focused offense, and I get it that it's going to take some time, but I think Georgia Tech threw, 10 passes against Clemson, when there were times in the game where Clemson was daring us to throw it, stacking 9-10 people in the box. Like, it's something that I get that you're not going to throw as much. You don't really have those skill players in, but it's something that I feel like you have to start at least getting it in there some.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And what I would like to see is play calling wise is basically what Baylor used to do back in the Art Briles and Kendall Briles days, and just put no receivers inside the numbers and make it just a numbers game for the defense. Are you going to, stack the extra guy out there to stop the receivers? Are you going to stack the extra guy in the box to stop the run and basically call RPOs with the read option or the now screen every single play? I think mixing more of that in, the quick RPO to screen to the outside and the read option to the inside with the receivers spaced out almost to the sideline would probably help the offense move the ball a little bit better.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, that's something I've wanted even during the Paul Johnson era, is a short to intermediate passing game. Because, I mean, you add that to Paul Johnson's offense, Paul Johnson's probably still coaching.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
definitely. Yeah, and I think the moving pocket that they did while Tobias was in was was at least a step in the right direction, right? You're taking advantage of not of having more or leaner offensive linemen, and having Tobias play to his strengths, running a little bootleg, and then trying to throw the ball. The problem is he can't throw the ball.
Right.
And a couple of those passes came out wobbly. They came out that his throwing arm did not look super clean. And again, it's like you said, it's nothing against him. He's just not your prototypical spread offense quarterback. But when you saw Lucas Johnson come in, you saw a little bit more traditional pocket. Like you saw a little bit more traditional pass blocking. Um, so I think once Lucas Johnson gets a little bit more game time under his belt, gets a little healthier, probably like you were saying that Achilles might still be nagging him a little bit. Once he gets fully game fit, you might see them work in that moving pocket for him too, and that's where I think as he gets more game time, that's where I think the offense can start to open up.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. A lot of TV people, a lot of media people love to talk about the moving pocket being a good thing for an inexperienced quarterback or for a quarterback who's naturally, naturally a runner like Tobias Oliver is. But there's also a lot of things wrong with it, and it's why I don't really think it's a great strategy for Georgia Tech's current makeup right now. And it's just because with a moving pocket, you get two things. Number one, you've got to throw on the run. And basically, every quarterback who's ever played the game is less accurate on the run than they are standing in the pocket. And then number two, you got smaller windows to fit the ball into because the defense, once they see the quarterback rolling, is going to roll the coverage that way too. Instead of being a too high safety look, if you're back in the pocket, it turns into a one safety high, one safety shaded far over toward the sideline. And it really changes the angles, that changes the windows that Tobias would have to fit the ball into. And I just think that giving him tiny windows to throw into, making him throw on the run, is liable to cause turnovers. I mean, I don't remember if any of the 4 turnovers were directly off of bootlegs like that. I remember Bo Nix throwing a pick last night off of a bootleg. Similar situation, inexperienced quarterback. They're trying to get him moving. I just think I would rather see the quarterback standing back there in the pocket with quicker reads to get the ball out into a one-on-one favorable situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, I'm on the James Graham / Jordan Yates hype train. We didn't get to see any of Yates against Clemson, and I completely understand. Selfishly, I really wish he had enrolled early and gotten more of a chance to learn the playbook. Because honestly, had he, I think he would kind of be in the same boat with James Graham, where he's above the line and probably would have played on Thursday night. He's a guy I think he's got a chance to be something really special. I'm also a big fan of Tucker Gleason, who's the quarterback that's currently committed to Georgia Tech. I think he and Yates are both going to be pretty fun to watch here on the flats.
Yeah, that recruiting or that quarterback battle next year after, I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. As you have James Graham, who's probably gotten more game time, and Jordan Yates coming in, and if he's taking a red shirt, if he's learned the playbook, and then Tucker Gleason, who's your more traditional trained spread quarterback. I think you have a wealth of talent at that position now, whereas the last couple of years you basically had a running back that can throw the ball occasionally. So it'll be really interesting next year looking at that battle.
I definitely agree.
All right. So let's move on to next week then. Georgia Tech will host South Florida at 2 p.m. Eastern at historic Grant Field at Bobby Dodd Stadium on the ACC network. It is a whiteout on the flats. The shirts, they look pretty good. Ethan, you were giving those out the other day, right? What do you think?
I was, yeah. They have the 404 on the front of them, and the 404, the different numbers are made up of some of the different words that Jeff Collins has been preaching about to start his tenure here as coach. The old grit and toughness and all the other ones,
together.
relentless effort.
Oh boy, I love the coach speak.
Yeah,
So
they
love
are
the
nice shirts
social
though.
media coach speak. Yeah. So let's see. For USF, their last game was at home versus Wisconsin. That was not a fun one for Charlie Strong and Blake Barnett and the boys down at South Florida. They lost 49-0. Yeah, it's very unclear how good or honestly, just how good the Bulls are this season, especially after they come off of a season where they won 7 straight to kick off 2018 and then proceeded to lose 6 games to end the year. So
Yeah.
I'll open up the floor to y'all. What do y'all think about this game? The spread is Georgia Tech by 4. Over under is 61 points. Both of those numbers are pretty early, but I don't expect them to change all that much.
Right, and I think as far as USF goes, that's a program that in recent years has started to pride itself on beating Power 5 teams. It beat Georgia Tech and it beat Illinois last year. It beat 1 or 2 the year before when they went 11-2. I can't remember who they beat, but they've started to start a tradition of that here under Charlie Strong, and to see them get beat 49-0 by a good Wisconsin team, not a national championship caliber Wisconsin team, but a good one, was still a little surprising for a program that returns starting quarterback, returns a fair amount on offense, has some turnover on defense, but looking at Blake Barnett's line as a senior, as a returning starting quarterback, you wouldn't expect. I can't. Not off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact numbers. It was something like 18 of 37 for 102 yards and 2 picks.
I've actually got it up right here. It's 13 of 30 for 109 yards and 2 picks.
Okay, yeah, I just remembered that his yards per attempt was hovering somewhere around 3 or 4 yards, and for a senior quarterback going against anybody, that's just absolutely horrendous, and they're gonna have to clean that up if they want to make a bowl game this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just looking at South Florida's schedule last year, and it makes sense why they lost their last 5 games. Looking at the teams they played, first one was against Houston, which always has a knack for running up the score, being able to just score a lot of points with their air raid. Lost to Tulane, who's got that Willie Fritz spread option thing. Cincinnati, who was ranked at the time. Jeff Collins, Temple, and then UCF, which... I mean, they're national champions if you want to argue that, but I believe that that game I think was the one that Mackenzie Milton got hurt in, but he played a little bit in that game. Greg McCrae ran for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns against South Florida. We kind of saw a similar performance from Jonathan Taylor, who ran for 135 yards, 2 touchdowns, caught another 2 touchdowns. And I mean, South Florida couldn't do anything to stop him. And I think that's going to be Georgia Tech's key to winning this game is getting the ball to your playmakers. And because I know with Jonathan Taylor, he's a bit on the faster side. So I think this could be a great opportunity for a breakout performance for Amare Brown, who's one of the fastest players.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. I've been on the Amare Brown hype train for a while now, and even though when they had the one catch against Clemson, it went for a touchdown, and he didn't look all that impressive on special teams. I would really like to see Jeff Collins and Dave Patnaud and the rest of the offensive staff make it a point of emphasis to get him involved this week. Screen passes, jet sweeps, more routes downfield, however it may be. He's got to get the ball, especially against a defense that may not be quite as quick as Clemson's is, and also has ridiculous turnover on the back end. I think they run a 4-2-5, and they lost either 4 or 5 of their starting defensive backs from last year.
So something else I noticed, I was watching the highlights before we got started. Their linebackers are really slow. Like they were trying to cover Jonathan Taylor, and they just could not. So I think another thing that you could see Tech play around with a little bit more on their above the line chart, they've got 2 running back positions. Your traditional running back, which is where you're going to see Jordan Mason, Jerry Howard, but they also have what's called an all-purpose back, which can line up in the backfield, flex out to the slot. You'll see a little bit more passing to them. So I think it's guys like Nate Cottrell. I think Jair Hawkins-Anderson is there. So I think you'll see those players get used a little bit more this week. And honestly, I think this week would be a great opportunity to really kind of show what your quarterbacks can do with passing the ball, with specifically with those short passes. Because watching the highlights from that game, South Florida's intermediate defense is not good. They looked lost, they looked slow, and I feel like as an offensive coordinator, you really have to take advantage of that.
Yeah, getting guys one-on-one out in space, be it the all-purpose backs, the slot receivers, or even the bigger receivers outside, like your Jalen Camp and Malachi Carter, putting them in one-on-one situations with the young and South Florida DBs and the slow South Florida linebackers would certainly be a solid starting point for a game plan this week.
And I mean, you're still going to see the quarterback run. We're going to see that probably forever. I think there's a chance that this one could get out of hand pretty quick. I didn't really see anything in South Florida's offense to make me think differently. And I think I'm trying not to get too optimistic about Georgia Tech just because I don't want my hopes to get crushed. But there were a lot of good things to see in that first game against Clemson. I don't think we're going to win 49-0. But I don't see it being quite as close as it was last year.
Interesting. Yeah, I was not able to catch the South Florida game on, I think it was Friday night, but just to me, some amount of that opening line, I think it's Georgia Tech by 4. Some amount of that line feels like an overreaction to a South Florida team that just looked horrible in week 1 and looked better than that for stretches last year. But then again, they're also on a 6 or 7 game losing streak now, dating back to last year. And I think that Georgia Tech will be able to win this game as well, even if it's a little tighter.
Yeah, this 4-point spread it seems light, especially when you're considering Tech effectively spotted South Florida 14 points last year on kickoff return touchdowns.
No need to remind folks.
We were at that game, Ethan. You remember?
Oh, I remember those too vividly.
Yeah. So I think if you clean up some of the special teams miscues, you emphasize, hey, let's get the ball out, let's get it out quickly, and you really pound the rock in that short and intermediate area with South Florida, like you're saying, Ben, Tech has a really good chance to break this game wide open potentially. All right. Any final thoughts on USF?
I think there's a slight chance we'll see Jordan Yates. At least that's what I'm hoping for. But we're probably going to see more than one quarterback again until someone really just comes out and takes that job and shows why they should be the starter.
I agree. I think definitely the quarterback battle is a starting place to look for. I'd like to see our front 7, come and, play well after giving up 205 yards and 3 touchdowns to ETN, now that they're facing an offensive line and skill position players that aren't nearly to the same level as the guys that Clemson runs out there. So I think this will be a good weekend for them to prove that they aren't what they showed on Thursday night.
All right, so let's move on to our weekly ACC tasting menu. Yes, it's just the Coastal. No, it's the slate this weekend is not that exciting. But Ben, why don't you kick us off?
All right. So to get started off Friday night, UVA is playing host to William and Mary. Be 8:00 Eastern on ACC Network. I mean, if Bronco Mendenhall knows what's good for him, he'll win that pretty handily. Got another couple games on Saturday that should probably also be blowouts. First one is Virginia Tech playing host to Old Dominion, who actually beat Virginia Tech last year. But Virginia Tech is currently a 28-point favorite, so we'll see how that goes. And then Duke is also playing host to NC A&T on ACC Network Extra. And then we do actually have a couple games that are it should be a little bit closer. Pitt is playing host to Ohio, and then Miami is hanging on to take the Fighting Mac Browns of UNC. So that should be a fun game.
Yeah, pretty good slate for the Coastal teams this week to be able to go out there and get some non-conference wins. You'd like to see UVA, Pitt, Virginia Tech, and Duke all take care of business and get wins. I think that game in Chapel Hill will be interesting. UNC as a underdog for the second straight week, and this time I don't think they'll be quite as fortunate. I think Miami will win that game. But still another good chance for Mac Brown and UNC to pick up a quality win early in the season. I'm also a little bit confused by that Ohio at Pitt line. Pitt only favored by 5.5. Yeah, I know they didn't look good against UVA on Saturday, losing by 2 scores, 30-14. But Ohio was only a middling MAC team last year, something like 7-5. So I would certainly expect that Pitt should cover that line.
I'm actually going to disagree with you a little bit about the Miami UNC game. I actually see UNC winning that game because, as we saw in Miami's game against Florida, if you can put pressure on Jaron Williams, Miami's starting quarterback, I mean, he's going to look like a freshman out there. Jay Bateman has done some decent work on that defense so far. They forced a couple turnovers in their first game against South Carolina, and just like going into the fourth quarter, they were down 20-9. And they held them there at that 20 points. So I think it'll be a close game. I don't know necessarily that UNC will win, but I feel pretty good about them.
Should be a great game on Saturday night, either way.
I kind of expect that line on Miami to move. I feel like it either moves more towards Miami if we get a little bit more reporting on, hey, Miami's actually comfortable. Hey, Miami's offensive line is not going to look like tissue paper this week. But for an opening line, that seems a little disrespectful for the hype that Miami has gotten this season.
I mean, I think it's mostly because you saw how bad that Miami offensive line was. Because Jaron Williams got sacked like 10 times in that game. And granted, Florida's front four is definitely one of the better ones in the SEC and in the country, but still, anytime your quarterback gets sacked 10 times in a single game, it's not just the defense. Like you need to take a hard look at that offensive line as well.
Yeah, they need to get some things figured out, but I also think that the guys that Miami has on defense will be able to get some pressure on Sam Howell back there, UNC's true freshman starting quarterback. And I think that ultimately they'll be able to force some turnovers and come up with enough big plays to win that game, something low scoring, like maybe 21-14, 23-16, somewhere along those lines. We'll see.
I could see that.
Hey, a Big Ten game could break out in the middle of Chapel Hill, and you could see like 6-3.
Yeah, certainly much different UNC team than the one that Georgia Tech beat 67-50 a few years ago.
Jeez. Man, that was a fun game.
Was that in basketball? You sure that one was in football?
I think that was 2012 peak Vad Lee right there.
I think it was, yep.
Oh, boy, Vad Lee. What could have been if we ran that diamond formation like more than once?
That Paul Johnson hated.
Memories. Such good memories.
Oh, yeah.
All right, moving right along into our Big Balls Paul's calls of the week. Ben, this is a bit of a tradition we have on the show.
Mm-hmm.
For how long we've been doing this, it's not that big of a tradition, but I digress.
Right.
So we basically pick a game every week. Sometimes we get weird with it. I know that Jake has a long-standing obsession with picking Big Ten games. Cade once tried to pick these games based on historical figures. I think it was like UCLA Cal.
And it got a little Stanford
weird.
Cal.
It was like it got a little weird, so I think I ended up cutting that part of the audio. But yeah. So Ethan, you wanna go first and show Ben how it's done?
I don't know about that, but I can go first. We got the battle of the Group of Five powers out of Florida this weekend. UCF, the 2017 national champions, head down to take on Florida Atlantic and Lane Kiffin. Definitely one of the more interesting Group of Five games of the year. I think UCF is favored by 8 there. I'll take UCF to cover that one. I think Lane Kiffin and his staff there have done some good work, and they've got a pretty good team. They're competitive up in Columbus this weekend, but it's going to take them a little while to get up to the level of the UCFs, even of the Group of Five world.
That line is low. That needs to be at least twice that, and I expect it to move that way too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We'll see. Florida Atlantic covered on Saturday, so they didn't look too bad.
All right. Well, I guess I can go next. So I'm actually going to use a game that we actually talked about earlier, Old Dominion heading over to Blacksburg to take on Virginia Tech. I'm gonna, like I mentioned earlier, Old Dominion won this game last year, and
They sure did.
granted, Old Dominion is not a good team, but I'm not convinced Virginia Tech is either. I'm gonna take Old Dominion to cover.
It's a solid pick. I could definitely see that game being close for a little while and causing a little bit more consternation among the Virginia Tech fans after last year.
Right.
Oh boy, if they lose 2 in a row to ODU, there might be some fires in Blacksburg.
About to say, if they lose, Justin Fuente doesn't make it through the year.
He might not.
I'm not
make
sure
it
he does
through the
anyway,
week.
but
he might not.
that
make it through
that
the
would
week in
guarantee it
Blacksburg.
that he would not make it through the year.
Yeah,
he's gone.
I agree with that one. And so to round out the slate, I will be taking Nebraska versus Colorado. That is a 3:30 kick on Fox. This is an old Big Ten rivalry or a Big 8 rivalry. Kind of excited for this one to come back. NU versus CU. Nebraska, they looked sketchy for portions of that game versus South Alabama this week.
But hey, Dedrick Mills got a couple of touchdowns in that game, so
he did. I think his
Yeah,
final line was
him.
like 14 carries, 55, 56 yards.
Mhm.
So honestly, did pretty good. Scott Frost in year 2, I mean, you got to do better than struggle to beat South Alabama, my guy.
I mean, hey, you saw year 2 at UCF for Scott Frost. That was pretty good.
That was pretty good,
baby. Nebraska, for some reason, is ranked like what, 21st, 24th. I have no idea how they got there after starting 4-8 or going 4-8 last year. But apparently, Husker Nation has a ton of hype in this season, so we'll see how it goes. However, Colorado looked really good versus Colorado State. That was a really good rivalry game to watch on Friday night. I think it was. So I'm gonna go against what I have written down here and say Colorado covers 7.5.
Ooh, I don't know about that.
Well, I don't know. It's weird because I think Nebraska is all smoke and no fire.
We'll see.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that Nebraska's a good team this year either. I don't know which way that game will go.
I have no doubt they're a good team. I don't think they're as good as the polls and the media are giving them credit for.
I mean, I don't think Colorado is much better. I mean, first-year head coach. I mean, really, what are we going to be able to know about them at this point?
That's true, but I think they still lose, but it's not going to be by a touchdown. It's gonna come down to the wire, I think.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah. So in recap of last week's picks, I picked Oregon to cover 3.5, and then they lost by 6.
Bad beat there.
Yep.
Minutes.
That's okay.
Ethan,
I picked Oregon to win that game.
Yeah, so did
Ethan,
I.
what do you have? What do you have?
I had ECU on the road in Carter Finley playing NC State, and they very nearly covered that one. They got down early, but kept fighting. And missed a cover by 1.5, unfortunately.
So I watched the highlights from that earlier, getting around the ACC article ready. That game wasn't as close as the score would indicate.
Oh yeah.
No, it was not. No, NC State.
I'd say NC State's quarterback is really good.
That's good for them.
That was brief clips I saw.
That's a major question mark heading into this year, whether they would be able to replace Ryan Finley, who had something like 66% of their total offensive yards per game last year.
That.
So,
but I want to say the new quarterback threw for like close to 300 yards if he didn't, a few touchdowns, or maybe not a few, but at least one touchdown. I think had another one on the ground. Like
pretty solid.
He played really well.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid line. And ECU did not look competitive in that game at all. I think NC State was able to move the ball with reckless abandon at various points during that game. I don't think ECU. I don't even remember how many total yards ECU had, but it can't have been that many.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it. I think you actually got your score wrong on that because I'm looking it up. NC State won 34-6, not 24-6.
Oh,
That more resembles the game I was watching, even if
Oh, yeah.
the score was a little more wrong. Yeah, NC State was clearly the better team on Saturday, and ECU, coming off of a 2-10 year, has a long way to go to get back to being competitive.
Yeah, but I found the line. McKay, who's the NC State quarterback, finished 25 of 37 through 308 yards and a touchdown, and another 35 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground.
That's a really good game.
All right, well, Ben, now I have to update Ethan's record and put him at first in our little table here. So thanks for that.
It happens.
To round out the slate, Jake, who is not with us this week, picked Northwestern to cover 7 and win outright, and they did neither of those things. And arguably the worst beat of this.
It was the worst beat of the week. Oh yeah,
that is. Oh my God, a fumble, a scoop and score as time expired for Stanford to win 17-7 on the farm. That is, I really hope any of y'all listening did not have money on that game because
that's a really bad beat.
I don't remember if I picked that one or not.
I think I picked Northwestern to a Northwestern +7 and lost. So, womp womp.
Ouch.
All right. Any final thoughts on Clemson, on USF, our ACC tasting menu?
I don't have anything.
I think I'm good too.
All
See
right.
what happens this weekend.
All right. So from beautiful San Francisco and Atlanta adjacent, this has been Scions of the Southland. We will see you all next week. Peace out.